A chromatic scale is a scale that goes from do to do by half steps. There are 13 half steps, including do, in the chromatic scale. When you make a chromatic scale ascending, you start on a note, do, and you create the scale by raising each note a half step. A half step above C, or do in this case, is C sharp. A half step above C sharp is D natural. A half step above D natural is D sharp. A half step above D sharp is E. And here's where it gets tricky. There's no sharp here because a half step between E and F occurs between the two white keys on the piano. It's a natural half step. The next half step would be F sharp. That would take you to G. The next half step is G sharp. And the next half step is A. The next half step above A is A sharp. A sharp goes up to B. And here again we have the natural half step between B and C. And we have finally found our way to the top. Do. C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, C. When writing a chromatic scale, you do not mix flats and sharps, so as you start the scale going up, you'll use the same accidentals that you were using before. Now descending, you go down in half steps, and that is always done by lowering a note by a half step, which means in this case we will be using flats. C to B natural is a natural half step. Then we go to B flat, then to A natural, then to A flat, then to G, then to G flat. G flat takes us a half step down to F. We know there's a natural half step between F and E. E goes to E flat. E flat to D, D to D flat, down to C. So you notice there are sharps going up as we ascend in the chromatic scale and flats coming down as we descend in the chromatic scale. Now here's a chromatic scale that begins on a flat. So instead of using sharps, and because we don't want sharps and flats to party together, here's how you would write this chromatic scale. It starts on a B flat. You go up a half step by canceling that B flat out with a natural sign. That takes you to B. There's a natural half step between B and C. Then the next thing you go up, if you were to use a sharp, we'd go to C sharp, but then we'd have flats and sharps partying together. So in this case, we move up a half step by going to D flat. D flat and C sharp are enharmonic equivalents. That means they sound the same, but they are spelled differently. If we continue to go up, we natural that D to go up a half step. Then from D natural, we move up a half step, not by using a sharp, but by going to E and making it flat. So we move to E flat, then to E natural. We know there's a half step between E natural and F. Now we're going to move up. We don't want to use F sharp again. We want to move to G flat, then to G natural. I hope the pattern is emerging. Then to A flat, then to A natural, then to B flat. And you have your scale. In the descending portion of this, we'd go B flat, back down to A natural, to A flat, to G natural, to G flat, to F, to E flat, to D, to D flat, to C, to B flat. So in this case, unlike the sharps the chromatic scale that we looked at before, where we were rising on sharps and descending on flats. Because this one begins with flats, you'd continue up using flats and then continue down using flats as well. And the natural is what, canceling the flat, raises everything a half step. Here's one more beautifully written out chromatic scale. The handwriting's a little bit better than mine. The chromatic scale is a scale that goes from do to do by half steps. One last piece of information about the chromatic scale. If you're confused about whether you should be using flats and sharps, I want to remind you that in the ascending portion, flats and sharps never party together. You might have a scale that, as this one in front of you does, starts on a C, goes up with sharps and half steps, and descends with flats. If you'll notice the pattern, though, with the chromatic scale, there are never more than 2 notes on the same line or space. If you start to mix the flats and the sharps, you could conceivably have 3 notes on the same space or flat. One is flat, one is naturaled, and one is sharped. But that is not how the scale is written. So you know that if you have more than 2 notes on the same line or space, that you've mixed something up. Sharps are always in the same thing, descending. They frequently they will always then descend in flats. And the chromatic scales that begin on a flat will go up with natural signs and go back down with the naturals and the flat signs.